Tonight, President Trump eyes more cities to send the National Guard to.
It's unconstitutional. It's a direct violation of the 10th Amendment.
How Democratic leaders are responding. Plus,
whoever attacks us, we attack them. Whoever plans to attack us, we attack them. I think the entire region is learning Israel's might and determination.
As Israel continues its advance on Hamas in Gaza City, details of an IDF strike against Houthi rebels in Yemen. And why the Trump administration is considering reclassifying marijuana. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. President Trump doubles down on his crime crackdown. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, President Trump is eyeing more cities to send the National Guard to. Democrats are pushing back, calling the move unconstitutional. This as some 2,000 National Guard troops patrol the nation's capital. And for the first time, some are armed. CBN's Dale Hurd has the story.
The Pentagon has reportedly been planning a National Guard deployment in Chicago for weeks, as President Trump seeks to take his crackdown on crime, homelessness, and illegal immigration to more cities. Several thousand National Guard troops could be mobilized by September, according to the Washington Post.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker pushed back against the president's claims about crime, accusing him of trying to divert attention away from the economic impact of tariffs, saying there is no emergency that warrants the President of the United States federalizing the Illinois National Guard. Donald Trump is attempting to manufacture a crisis. Former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel says he does not believe it's about crime.
This is an attempt to deal with cities that are welcoming cities, known as sanctuary cities, and deal with immigration.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says Trump has no authority to deploy troops to Chicago without being asked by the governor.
Well, there's been no request from the state of Illinois, no request at all for federal assistance.
It's unconstitutional. It's a direct violation of the 10th Amendment.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore accuses the president of being hypocritical for blaming mayors for high crime. In a post on Truth Social, Trump suggested he could withhold funds to repair Baltimore's damaged Francis Scott Key Bridge, writing, "I gave Wes Moore a lot of money to fix his demolished bridge. I will now have to rethink that decision." While the Constitution forbids the military from performing law enforcement duties, the president can get around it by invoking the Insurrection Act, which allows him to deploy active duty troops over a governor's objections to enforce the law. Dale Hurd.
Okay, thank you, Dale. And for more on this, let's bring in our panel, CBN News senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright and Donnell Harvin, former D.C. Chief of Homeland Security and Intelligence and a faculty member at Georgetown University. Gentlemen, welcome. So, Kelly, to you first. The president, he signed an executive order today removing no cash bail. Tell us about that and the dealings at the White House today.
Well, it was quite a moment for the president. He stated that he was going to do this all along, and he has followed through with the plan with Attorney General Pam Bondi at his side, as well as the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and other members of his cabinet, including Department of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. But the president says in this executive order that the same individuals who commit crimes multiple times are often released because of this cashless bail. And he says with that, dangerous criminals are sometimes rapidly released, and this leaves such criminals free to endanger American citizens and even tourists coming to the nation's capital, even federal workers, and the citizens of Washington, D.C. themselves, who are trying, as he states, to live lives that are free of crime. With that, he has moved to actually remove this cashless bail to prohibit it through his own executive order.
Kelly, the National Guard troops, we reported, are now also armed, some of them at least, with M17 pistols. What's the White House saying about that tonight?
The White House is saying that the National Guard, they need to be armed because of what they might encounter on the streets of Washington, D.C. The president talking about the fact that there are gangs in Washington, D.C., and some of those gangs are armed and dangerous and should be considered as such and a threat to National Guard troops. Now, keep in mind, the National Guard, according to the White House, is also going through a lot of training to learn how to augment the Metropolitan Police Department and learn how to train in those situations where they're encountering people who are Americans living in their own city in Washington, D.C. And so, with that training and then the augmentation of the Metropolitan Police Department, they have made the decision to arm those National Guard troops. And people will be watching that very closely to see how they are utilized.
Yeah. Danelle, DC Metro Police, they are reporting 0 homicides from August 14th to August 24th, the city's longest murder-free stretch in recent years. Your reaction to that and the troops in DC now being armed?
Well, certainly that's a great statistic. I don't think anyone could sit here and say that they're disappointed about that. I think the question is at what cost. I was at DC. I was in DC yesterday. I was in DC on Friday, and it's almost like a police state. I was in Iraq earlier this year. I was in some very rough places in Egypt and Cairo, and I saw less police in Iraq. I was in Baghdad. So, the question is, how long is this going to surge? What happens when they leave? And what's the long-term plan? In terms of the National Guard being armed, once again, I think the president's right. I mean, there are some, people with guns in D.C. My question as a former law enforcement official is the training, which is like what I questioned last week, what type of training they're getting. DC Police, I went to that academy. I was there for 9 years. Get extensive training in all types of scenarios. So hopefully they're getting that training. But one thing that the National Guard does not have, and I saw this with my own eyes yesterday, is they don't have body-worn cameras. And so when they do encounter someone and there is some use of force and it escalates, it's essentially the National Guard's person's word against that citizen. And so without that, there's no accountability.
Yeah. Kelly, back to you. What did the president say about the decrease in homicides? Did he address that today?
Well, yes, he talked about it and he touted it as being very substantive, that in the past 11 days, there has been no homicide whatsoever. He wanted to say, you watch, though, as I'm quoting the president here, he says, my critics, if something happens and there is a murder committed during this time of the federal takeover of the nation's capital. He says, my critics will say that this is because of Donald Trump's policies. And he wanted to say people are trying to state that he's trying to be a dictator. He says he doesn't want to do that at all. He wants to bring safety to the people of Washington, D.C., as well as the federal workers who live and reside here as well, and of course the tourists who come here.
Yeah, not just D.C., Danelle. The president now also eyeing some other cities like Chicago as the next place to send the National Guard. Democrats and even some Republicans are questioning whether he has the authority to do that.
Well, I'm not a legal scholar, but I'll tell you, for any of your viewers, just close your eyes and think about how you'd feel if you took your kid to a soccer game or you went to the corner market or the farmer's market and you saw Humvees there with armed military people, because that's what I see in D.C. And most of the residents I've come across, they don't want them there. In fact, there was a woman in Union Station last week on Friday there crying and asking them to go back to their state. And so while DC is particularly vulnerable to this type of federal government takeover because DC is not a state, I think you'll see a lot more pushback from other states. And this is not really a red or white or green or purple thing. This is really, how do we want to live? Do we want to live in a police state? The last thing I'll say is, any law enforcement official will tell you you cannot get rid of crime, you cannot get rid of homelessness with people with guns. It's a multi-layered problem that got them there. It's a multi-layered solution that's going to get them out of the problems that they have. And we haven't seen any of that coming from the White House yet.
Kelly, the president also talked about sending the National Guard to Baltimore. Governor Wes Moore, he was pushing back on that this weekend. Dale had him in his report, too.
Yeah, so Governor Moore has stated very clearly that he has already tried to implement more safety measures on the streets of Baltimore, Maryland. He grew up in public housing. He grew up in the inner city. He knows exactly what's happening. Because of that, he thought that the first order of the day would be to increase his police force. He thinks that should be being done on the Washington, D.C. streets as well. And he's even invited the president to go along with him on a public safety tour when they're out there trying to quell the violence and the crime. The president has stated from the Oval Office today that he would be more than willing to do that once the crime rate is brought down in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore, Maryland. So these two are actually in a heated exchange politically as they talk about how to implement better policing on the streets of Baltimore, Maryland, as well as Washington, D.C., and for that matter, other cities potentially throughout the United States.
Now I'll give you the final word.
Well, the final word is where does this end, right? And so I can tell you that DC's crime is as low as it's been in 30 years. In fact, if the president was so concerned about crime, it was a lot higher in 2018 and 2019 during his first term, and he didn't do this. And so the question many of us have in the business is where does this end and how far does it extend? Do we really want to live in a city that there's police on every corner and Humvees? And the question really is up to the citizens.
Okay. Kelly and Danelle, panel, thank you very much. Great to have you both.
Thank you.
In other news, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back in ICE custody, this time facing deportation to Uganda. As an illegal immigrant, he was originally deported to El Salvador in what U.S. officials called an administrative error. Abrego Garcia turned himself in to immigration officials in Baltimore just days after being released from federal custody. The Trump administration accuses him of MS-13 ties, claims his lawyers deny. Homeland Security says Abrego Garcia is being processed for deportation to Uganda. Israel continues its push into Gaza City while facing a new round of attacks from Yemen. The latest from the Middle East, next. Welcome back. World leaders prayed for peace in Ukraine at the second annual National Prayer Breakfast in Kyiv.
And I believe even right now, there's angels protecting this great nation. And I believe a revival is about to take place like never before.
I thank you, God Almighty. Save Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
And that first speaker was Pastor Mark Burns, one of the President Trump's spiritual advisors. More than 1,000 dignitaries, military and faith leaders attended, including Edward Graham of Samaritan's Purse and White House envoy Keith Kellogg, who also took part in ceremonies to mark 34 years of Ukraine's independence from the former Soviet Union. Despite recent high-level talks, Russia says the timing isn't right for a face-to-face meeting between the two warring nations. Turning now to the Middle East, Israel is investigating a deadly strike on a hospital in Gaza. Video from the scene shows chaos. Rescue workers rushing in after the first explosion, surrounded by thick smoke and falling debris. Then a second strike hits the hospital. Among those killed was 33-year-old journalist Miriam Daga, along with others from Reuters and Al Jazeera. The Foreign Press Association says the strikes targeted an area where journalists frequently set up their cameras and came without warning. Israel confirmed it carried out a strike in the area and says an investigation is underway.
I would like to be clear from the start. The IDF does not intentionally target civilians. The IDF makes every effort to mitigate harm to civilians while ensuring the safety of our troops.
Meanwhile, as Israel's campaign against Hamas continues, the IDF also struck Houthi targets in Yemen's capital over the weekend. The strike came in response to a Houthi-launched ballistic missile on Friday. Michael O'Hanlon joins us now. He is a senior fellow and director of research and foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. Michael, good to see you. Welcome. So let's start with the hospital strike in Gaza. Your reaction to that, Michael, and in a war zone like that, how hard is it to distinguish between legitimate military targets and civilians?
Greetings, Jenna. Well, it certainly is hard. And in a tactical sense, therefore, I certainly understand Israel's dilemma. But in a broader political and strategic sense, I think Israel's gone without a serious strategy too long. You cannot simply pummel the place to a point where there are no terrorists left. That's just not going to be a viable endgame. And to the extent Israel has that model in mind, it's going to continue to wind up carrying out strikes that it believes sincerely are going after bad guys, and they probably are, but they are also going to be killing innocent people who are in close proximity. So I think the main missing piece here is to rethink what the political endgame is. And Israel has shown no interest in a two-state solution or in helping the Palestinians build up an alternative to Hamas that could govern Palestinian territories. That's where I would be critical. And then everything else follows from that mistake.
Yeah. We also saw Israel strike Houthi targets in Yemen over the weekend, Michael. What threat do the Houthis pose to Israel right now?
Well, the Houthis have launched missiles towards Israel, and it's not been anything close to the barrage they've used against Red Sea shipping or their neighbors, Saudi Arabia and even UAE at one point. But it's been serious. It's nothing to be taken lightly, and I can't criticize Israel at all for striking back in that regard.
Yeah. So Israel and Syria are reportedly in advanced talks on a U.S.-backed security deal. It could lead to demilitarizing parts of the Golan Heights and keeping dangerous weapons out of Syria. Michael, can Israel trust this new Syrian leadership, or is this just a tactical pause in a long-term threat?
Well, Israel won't trust the Syrian leadership, so we can debate whether they should, but they won't. The new Syrian leadership is quite fascinating in a lot of ways. It overthrew a monster, President Bashar al-Assad, who had the blood of hundreds of thousands on his hands and who was an ally of Iran, an ally of Vladimir Putin. And so I am personally happy for the change, but this new government is relatively weak, still trying to consolidate control. There have been abuses carried out by pro-government forces at times, and we certainly, and Israel certainly, cannot assume everything's going to be hunky-dory and stable on Syrian soil. I think the Trump administration has been correct to explore the possibility of reaching out to this new government to try to induce them to be more inclusive, even though they're run by former jihadists who are very hardline. The good news is these jihadists are pretty anti-Iran, obviously anti-Assad, and I think now interested in governing the whole country the way they were governing up north for the last few years, where things reportedly were pretty good, at least by Syrian standards of the day. So Israel is going to be careful about this, as they should be. But the Trump administration, I think, is doing some smart things by exploring a better relationship.
Institution, great to have you on this Monday. Thank you, Michael. Up next, changing status, the White House's proposal to reclassify marijuana and the warnings from experts. The Trump administration is considering reclassifying marijuana on the federal level. Right now, it's a Category 1 drug on the level of heroin and LSD. The change could open up more access to the drug. Medical reporter Lori Johnson tells us what's at stake.
Reducing marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug means cannabis shops will enjoy a reduced tax burden and greater access to banking. It would also expand research opportunities into marijuana's therapeutic potential. The president told reporters it's important to make the right decision because marijuana is a complicated subject.
I've heard great things having to do with medical, and I've had bad things having to do with just about everything else. But medical and, for pain and various things, I've heard some pretty good things. But for other things, I've heard some pretty bad things.
Last year on Truth Social, the president appeared to support reclassification by posting his administration will focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug and support safe banking for state-authorized companies and states' rights to pass marijuana laws. Marijuana is legal in 40 states for medical use. It's lawful to use recreationally in 24 states. That easy accessibility, coupled with high THC content, which makes today's pot more potent, has led to a sharp increase in cannabis poisonings, more than 22,000 last year, up from 930 in 2009. Frequently, young children are among that number.
I have taken care of numerous children over the years who have unfortunately gotten into parents, friends, relatives, marijuana or THC gummies and other candies, right? Because they come in cute little packages. They're colorful. They often look just like candy.
Overdoses can create severe symptoms like heart palpitations and agitation that often lead to hospitalization.
They may exhibit hallucinations, so they may be seeing or hearing things that are not there, which, as you can imagine, can be scary. Other people may have some gastrointestinal symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and things of that nature.
It's not only the health consequences that are raising concerns. Some warn of the spiritual dangers of marijuana.
I think for Christians, they should heed what the Bible says in 1 Peter, that we should be sober and alert. I think that if you're somebody who believes the Bible, you should look to verses like that and see that obviously getting high, whether it's marijuana or any other drug, not a very good idea.
The group Smart Approaches to Marijuana wants the Trump administration to keep the drug as a Schedule I substance. They're inviting those who share their concern to log on to noschedule3.com to sign the petition.
Then when you're done with that, you can go to our website, learnaboutsam.org. And there we have the steps for you to take to write to the White House. And then finally, you can go on social media, get on X, tag the president, tag the vice president. Let them know that you don't want them to reschedule marijuana.
President Trump says he'll make a decision on reclassification within the next few weeks. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thank you, Lori. And still ahead, the powerful movie premiere highlighting a revolution on college campuses.
Download the CBN News app. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Get the CBN News app today.
Finally tonight, the worldwide premiere of CBN's latest documentary is almost here. The Revival Generation premieres at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. this Wednesday, August 27th. The film highlights the incredible move of God in the hearts of college students and on campuses across the country. The worldwide premiere will feature a special musical performance and time of worship to celebrate what God is doing in Gen Z. CBN's Abigail Robertson shared more in an Instagram post about the film's upcoming release.
We have Tasha Cobbs-Leonard coming in to lead worship, and we believe this night is much more than just a film premiere. We want to celebrate how God is pouring out His Holy Spirit all over the world right now.
And tickets to the premiere are free, and you can find out how to claim yours today at therevivalgeneration.com. And we, of course, hope to see you there on Wednesday this week. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you here tomorrow.